Joe Biden is under attack from his own side. They're trying to push him out. The New York Times, Washington Post, New York Magazine, all kinds of left-wing publications that normally circle around the Democratic president. They're seeking to get Joe out of the White House as fast as humanly possible, out of the Democratic Party nomination, out of the race for president of the United States, so that they can actually win. Because right now it is not looking good for Democrats. Not looking good at all. However, to this point, old Joe Biden, he's a fighter, he's resisted, and he's president of the United States. It's going to be hard to push him out. So Democrats need some help. Who are they going to get help from? Well, there is an old enemy of the Democratic Party, the Democratic Socialists of America. They hate the Democratic Party establishment. They hate them. But more than the Democratic Party establishment itself, they hate Joe Biden. And they want him out of the White House. And they've got a plan to put pressure on Joe Biden to leave office, or at the very least, to embarrass him very, very badly. Will the plan work? What is the plan? It all centers around the Democratic National Convention, which will be held in Chicago, Illinois in August. Will this be successful? What are they planning? How embarrassing is it going to be for the White House? All of that we're going to discuss today on this episode of the Justin Haskins Show. Before we do, brief introduction and call to action. My name is Justin Haskins. Thank you for joining the show. Please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and hit that little alarm button that will allow you to receive an update, a notification when a new video is posted. All of these things are going to help break through big tech algorithms that hold content like this back. It only takes a minute, doesn't cost any money at all. Just like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance. All right, so topic today. This is something that just isn't getting a lot of news, a lot of headlines. It should be. It's really incredible. The Democratic Party is at war. There's an internal civil war within the Democratic Party. Some folks within the Democratic Party want to push Joe Biden out. Some want to keep old Joe in because they think that's the best opportunity for them to win the election against Donald Trump in November. But that's been getting all the headlines. What hasn't been getting the headlines is the Democratic Socialists of America are planning a huge event. They're part of a couple of huge events, and they've got their own plans in the works as well, it seems, centered around the Democratic National Convention in August in Chicago. For those of you who don't know, Chicago is actually kind of a hotbed of socialism. The Democratic Socialists of America is the largest socialist organization in the United States. They've only got a little less than 100,000 members, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't seem that big compared to like the Democratic Party or compared to the Republican Party or something, or even the Libertarian Party. But they're not a political party. This is an activist organization. And so it's a very large, very prominent activist organization on the far left. And those are just the number of members. They also have a lot of influence in other ways. And some of their past and current members have been incredibly influential, especially at the local and state level in politics and in cultural institutions and things like that. Probably the most famous is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman from New York. She really benefited from the DSA, as they're called, Democratic Socialists of America. She was a member. I think she might still be a member. I'm not 100% sure, but I know she was a member. Helped her get elected in New York when she beat a long-standing incumbent Democrat in New York. I think his name was Crowley, if I'm remembering right. And so AOC really relied heavily on the DSA. So the DSA has had a lot of influence as of late relative to what they've done in the past. But for the most part, they're Marxist extremists who love to stir up trouble, love to cause problems for the Democratic Party, and really want to see Joe Biden out of the race. And we'll talk about why in just a moment. They've got a plan to do that. Here's the plan. Let me pull up their social media account. This is one of the things that they posted to a Google Drive. They posted this on a link to this on social media. That's how I found about it. It's an event that they're planning to hold. They've got a couple of events that they're planning to hold with they're not really the ones necessarily hosting these events. They're part of a coalition of other crazy left-wing groups, but they're one of the biggest left-wing groups in the mix. They're calling it Crash the Party, March on the DNC. Okay. March on the DNC is actually, I think, the full title of the event that they're hosting or that they're participating in. It's occurring on August 19th and August 22nd. That's the first day and last day of the Democratic National Convention. The plan is to have these huge protests that are going to start at a couple of different parks in Chicago, I think, and then they're going to march, I believe. And the idea here is to embarrass the Democratic Party into taking a hardline position on Israel. The DSA is staunchly anti-Israel. They are seemingly pro-Hamas. That's how I would characterize them. They are definitely not fans of Israel, and taken really radical positions on a whole bunch of foreign policy issues. We'll go into some of those in a little bit. But this particular event, Crash the Party, March on the DNC event, is described here as, let's see here. Yeah, it's described here as, since late October, the Israeli government has killed 35,000 Palestinians in Gaza, displaced 2 million from their homes. In that same time, the U.S. government has provided more than $12 billion in military aid to Israel. As Biden himself has admitted, American bombs have been used to carry out war crimes. Meanwhile, cities like Chicago are struggling to get the federal funding we need to revitalize our public transit system, fully fund our public schools, house the homeless, and provide other essential services. So next month, Biden will be coming to Chicago for the Democratic National Convention. The DNC will be a major disruption for everyone in Chicago, with the city already having pushed back the start of the school year to accommodate the convention. I didn't know that. And the CTA plan to provide the DNC with up to 250 buses. CTA is the public transit authority in Chicago. It's going to be a nightmare trying to get anywhere that week, but it's going to be an even bigger nightmare for Biden and the Democratic Party. Democratic Socialists of America is proud to have joined the March on the DC coalition, and we are calling on all our members and supporters to join us for the major marches planned for August 19th and August 22nd. We may not be able to get Biden to change course, but with enough angry people outside the convention center, we can certainly make the DNC a complete political disaster for his campaign. This is a message that the DSA has echoed on their social media accounts as well. You can see this here. This is from the Chicago DSA X account. And this was posted on July 3rd, 2024. We may not be able to get Biden to change course, but with enough angry people outside the convention center, we can make the DNC a complete political disaster for his campaign. And then they have a whole bunch of other posts talking about how the Biden administration is complicit in genocide, how they need to push Joe Biden out. They've issued a statement. The Democratic Socialists of America have officially called on Joe Biden to drop out of the presidential race and for someone else to step in who is going to be in support of Gaza and opposed to the nation of Israel. They've called Israel occupiers. They've talked about them being human rights abusers. They've said that it's an anti-democratic state. They've also alleged that they're an apartheid state. All really radical talking points echoed by terrorist organizations like Hamas and others, or in line with things that you've heard from Hamas, not necessarily echoed by them, but just absolutely incredible. Now, what does this actually mean? The DSA wants to march on the convention in Chicago. They're part of a coalition of other leftists that are going to march on the convention. They know that they can't push him out, but as they said, they want to to embarrass them. The goal is to embarrass Joe Biden. The goal is to try to put pressure on him to leave the race. That is incredibly clear. The DSA, just to give you a sense of just how radical this organization is and the kinds of things that they want from Democrats, unlike the Democratic Party, which is left-leaning, they do have some socialists in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is mostly a party of progressivism, elitism, with some elements of socialism in the party. But Democratic Socialists of America are like full-blown communist Marxists, okay? Communism in the very traditional Marxist sense of the word, not the Chinese Communist Party or what you think of as the more recent Soviet Union, you know, like in the 1980s, 70s, 60s, that period of time. They are traditional Marxists. And by that, I mean, they want to get rid of markets. They want to get rid of capitalism. They want a utopian version of society where the means of production are all owned collectively, and the goods and needs of society are met through this collective ownership of the means of production. Very Marxist in their outlook. This comes directly from their website, Democratic Socialists of America, dsausa.org. What is democratic socialism? And you can see this here. It says here, capitalism is a system designed by the owning class to exploit the rest of us for their own profit. We must replace it with democratic socialism, a system where ordinary people have a real voice in our workplaces, neighborhoods, and society. We believe there are many avenues that feed into the democratic road to socialism. Our vision pushes further than historic social democracy. That's how they would frame sort of your basic, like Social Security, welfare programs, single payer healthcare. They would call that a social democracy. So they're saying they want to go further than that. Leaves behind authoritarian visions of socialism in the dustbin of history. So they claim they're not authoritarian. Of course, I would argue socialism is always authoritarianism. It inevitably leads to that. It's part of trying to create Marxist utopian socialism. You end up with authoritarian socialism at the end of the day. They say we want a democracy that creates space for us all to flourish, not just survive, and answers the fundamental questions of our lives with the input of all. So DSA is radical, to say the least. The Chicago DSA is a particularly radical chapter of the DSA and an influential and powerful one. And they're going to be heading to the Democratic National Convention with their sights set on embarrassing Joe Biden, embarrassing the Democratic establishment. So will it work? Does it matter? Now, ordinarily, I would say no. I'd say no, probably not, right? Like probably it won't. But in this particular case, given how weak Joe Biden is in this particular situation, and given the fact that this anti-Israel, pro-Hamas or pro-Gaza position that a part of the Democratic Party has embraced, given the fact that that's becoming increasingly more popular amongst Democrats, and it just seems like if there is this huge anti-Biden wave, literally marches against Biden and his administration outside the Democratic National Convention, the most important event for the Democrats in the run-up to the general election, the idea that that's not going to have some impact on people's thoughts about whether Joe Biden can win, I think is naive. I'm not saying it necessarily will sink Joe Biden, but it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like in and of itself, it's not necessarily a huge deal. Like if everything else was going swimmingly for old Joe right now, I don't know that this would be the thing that this would not be the thing that would crush him or anything like that. But when combined with all the other crazy stuff that's been going on, when combined with the anti-Biden wave from the New York Times, the anti-Biden wave from CNN and MSNBC, from Jake Tapper and people like that, the anti-Biden wave that has now emerged from previous allies in Hollywood, like George Clooney who recently published an op-ed with the New York Times, a huge ally who organized fundraisers for Biden, helped him raise millions of dollars just several weeks ago. Now coming out in the New York Times saying Joe needs to step down. The idea that you combine that with an embarrassing convention in Chicago and that isn't going to have any effect on Biden at all, no effect on on what donors think of him, no effect on whether people in the party believe this man can actually win. Ooh, another bad week of media coverage for him, potentially. A reminder to all of those anti-Israeli Democrats out there who are considering not voting for Joe that, there is this whole conflict in the Middle East and Joe's on the wrong side of it from their perspective. Right before leading up, at a time it's supposed to be galvanizing support for him. The idea that that's not going to have a huge impact, I think, again, naive. This is going to have a major, major impact on Joe Biden, depending on how disruptive it is. Now, the DSA has been working behind the scenes. They've been meeting. They've actually held meetings earlier in July to help sort of coordinate what they're going to do to have these giant protests in Chicago. They're having strategy sessions. They're preparing for some pretty extreme protests. A lot of it seems to be closed door, so we don't exactly know what they're planning to do, but we do know that they're planning on having a huge event featuring thousands of protesters potentially. So, at the end of the day, whether this works or not, it certainly isn't good news for Joe Biden. I think we could say that. At the very least, this is not good news for Joe Biden. I want to give a quick update on where we stand in the election. This is Real Clear polling. General election, Trump versus Biden. This is a whole bunch of recent polls. If you're not familiar with Real Clear polling, Real Clear politics, I highly suggest that you check out Real Clear Politics. It's an awesome website with lots of great information and polling and aggregate polling and all sorts of stuff like that. The latest polls show that at best, Biden is tied. We've got, like 15 different polls listed here, something like that, national polls. And in 2 of them, Biden is tied. In none of them, Biden is winning. Some of them have Trump up as much as 6. There's 1, 2, 3 polls that have Trump up by 6 points. The likely voter polls which are better polls. Those are polls where they screen out people who say they're not going to vote or they're not likely to vote in the election. So the likely voter polls tend to be more accurate representation of what's going to happen in the election. The likely voter polls are a little bit worse typically for Biden in these races. Not always, but typically. But even the registered voter polls and the polls of just the general public, it just looks really good for Trump. Keep in mind that in the run-up to the 2020 election, Trump was not polling anywhere near as well as he's polling right now. Like it wasn't even close. And Trump barely lost in 2020. A lot of people think of it, they look at the Electoral College count and they look at the popular vote and they say, oh, Trump got blown out. He didn't really get blown out. He barely lost, because if he had just won Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia, 3 states that he should have won probably. If he had just won those 3 states, then it would have been like a 269 tie, and the House of Representatives run by the Republicans would have voted for Trump almost certainly and put him in the White House, and Trump would have won. And if you take the total vote count between those 3 states, the total difference between Trump and Biden in those 3 states, it was less than 50,000 votes. So less than 50,000 votes out of millions in those 3 states decided the election. And now Trump is polling significantly better in all of those states than he did in 2020. And he's polling better in a whole bunch of other swing states that really could be disastrous for Joe Biden. So at the end of the day, this is looking really, really good for Trump. Looking really, really good for Trump. It's just more bad news for Joe Biden can't possibly help him. So if the Democratic Socialists of America, sorry, I should have pulled up those poll results on screen earlier. I didn't. Let me pull those up. If the Democratic Socialists of America go through with their plan, these are the poll results right here. Trump up 3, tie, Trump up 3, Trump up 2, Trump up 6, Trump up 6, Trump up 2, tie, Trump up 2. I mean, and we're talking about ABC News, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CBS News. I mean, they're all showing him Trump up big. Okay. That's what I wanted to show earlier. That's what I was referring to. But the point is, if the Democratic Socialists of America go through with their plan and they crash the party and they ruin Joe Biden's convention and they embarrass him and all of that, it's just going to be another sign that Joe Biden is not the guy. And at the last minute, they might throw him out. He might resign. It's still possible to kick Joe Biden out at the convention. Even that is a possibility, that a last minute resignation. I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility for Joe Biden to announce his resignation at the convention. I think that's possible, that he might do that. So this is just bad news for Joe Biden, but good news for America. Because anytime you have bad news for Joe Biden, or almost anytime you have bad news for Joe Biden, it's good news for America, because Joe Biden has been a disaster and needs to leave the White House as soon as humanly possible. A whole lot more we could talk about, but I think you get the big picture. All of the stars are aligning against Joe. This is just not looking good for Joe Biden at all. And I don't care if you're a Joe Biden supporter or a Donald Trump supporter, or you hate them both. You have to acknowledge right now, things for Joe Biden are not looking good. And now you've got these crazy socialists who are planning to make things even worse for Joe. Just a disaster. One of the craziest times in American history when you're talking about politics. Just an absolutely insane period of time. Just wild. All right, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for watching. Please, again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, help us break through those big tech algorithms. Until next time, my name is Justin Haskins. Thank you for watching, and please stay free.